Bill Roggio is a senior fellow at FDD and editor of FDD's Long War Journal. Bill is also a terrorism analyst and is joining us live from Medford, New Jersey. Mr. Roggio, welcome to the program. Help us understand why this relationship between the U.S. and Israel, which is obviously teetering, will become worse once Israel pushes ahead with a rough offensive. And what will the U.S. do then when that mistake, according to President Biden, happens?
Hello, and thank you. Yes, the rift between Israel and the United States is growing. It has been festering for some time. There's several reasons for this. The Biden administration is under domestic political pressure from the left wing of the Democratic Party for there to be a ceasefire. I mean, look, let's face it, this is the pro-Hamas wing of the Democrat Party that President Biden is responding to. A friend of mine jokes that President Biden has a two-state solution, and that is Michigan and Minnesota, where the Muslim voters there hold some sway in the election. So there is that. I also believe that there is serious dislike between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and this is also coming to the fore. The President Biden and his staff have increasingly become anti-Israeli as time has gone on. Mm-hmm. There is all the criticism in the world for Israel, and yet we have heard none of it directed at Hamas. There has been no demand for Hamas to accede to a ceasefire. Hamas's demand for a ceasefire is that Israel cease all operations. That would mean the survival of Hamas. It would continue to rule in Gaza. That's a non-starter for the Israelis. And after Hamas's horrific attack, which, by the way, had no consideration for civilians on October 7th, didn't have a humanitarian plan.
Mr. Roggio, let's talk about that ceasefire. Now that the U.S. is talking about a ceasefire that Israel should agree to and allow in aid. But before you respond, there is a new problem, and you mentioned it. Hamas has rejected a U.S. plan for temporary ceasefire and instead plans to put forward its own ceasefire roadmap. What do you make of all this confusion? Because this is confusing even to the civilians.
There is no confusion. Hamas's demand is for Israel to cease all military operations and withdraw from Gaza. That's its demand. It hasn't moved on this. And as President Biden and the U.S. administration continues to push Israel and not Hamas, Hamas becomes more entrenched. So to me, this is quite simple. All of the pressure is being put on Israel. And by the way, what other country would provide humanitarian aid to a state or to a people that it's at war with? Did the U.S. provide aid to the Taliban and the Afghan people as it conducted its invasion? Do the Russians do this in Ukraine? Does any country do this when they're at war? And why is Israel the only country that's required to provide aid and comfort to its enemies? While, if Hamas wants this war to end, all they need to do is surrender. It's that simple. If Hamas cared about civilian population, it would lay down its arms and allow the world to provide for the Palestinian people.
Okay, so you have various mediators haggling over a truce in Cairo. Then you have the Israeli Prime Minister huddling with the war cabinet and his ministers over directions of the war, and all of them giving varying statements. And yet the fighting has not stopped, and there is no sign of it ending soon. In your opinion, who or what is the problem here?
The problem to me is Hamas. Now, within Israel, as far as the statements or the statements that don't really make sense coming from each party, we have to keep in mind this is a war cabinet, as you noted, and it isn't just Netanyahu. If the U.S. thinks things are going to change with Netanyahu leaving, which I think he should, by the way, he shouldn't take ownership for October 7th. Israel would be the best thing to happen to Israel would be for someone else to take control of this. Let Benny Gantz see how easy it is for the domestic political pressure, because if he thinks it's great for the hostages, there's greater pressure to defeat Hamas. Mm-hmm. The fighting is ongoing because Hamas will not surrender and Hamas will not negotiate a ceasefire. And Israel is unwilling to allow Hamas to continue ruling Gaza as its right. It was invaded on October 7th. It suffered heinous crimes, and it has every right under international law to defeat the Hamas government. And this is where the whole problem is. Hamas refuses to surrender, and Israel refuses to allow Hamas to continue to exist. And then the U.S. and Qatar and Egypt and Turkey are putting pressure on Israel to essentially allow Hamas to exist. This isn't sustainable for the Israelis. They'd be better suited to quickly go into Rafah and finish this campaign. Of dragging this out only hurts Israel in the long run and helps Hamas.
All right, I've been talking to Bill Roggio, who is a senior fellow at FDD and editor of FDD's Long War Journal. He is also a terrorism analyst. Bill Roggio, thank you very much for talking to WION World is One today.
Thank you, sir.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.